Okay, welcome back, Programming 11. Today we are going to be improving the code of the PewPew game. It's not going to radically change. We're still going to have the same kind of stuff going on, but we're going to improve the way our code is written. This is a really important part of computer programming, and it's something that in a project-based course sometimes gets forgotten because you're kind of focused on making the game itself really cool, but you may neglect to take care of your code. Sometimes you're thinking, as long as this is working here, as long as the game itself or whatever you're making is working, it doesn't really matter what this looks like. But that's not true. And as you go further and further into programming, it's going to become a bigger and bigger part of your task is to make your code beautiful, not just your final product beautiful. So we're going to spend some time doing that today. Specifically, what I'd like to do is to take some of these uglier if statements. Check out some of these if statements. Look at this. Blah, this is so long and ugly. It's just a big ugly if statement. Off the top of your head, you might know what that does. You might have sort of internalized, oh yeah, the distance between the two objects compared to the sum of their radii. That's a collision. But that's if someone was just looking at this, if someone just arrived, even if they were an experienced programmer, they would have to think about that. They have to be like, what's going on here? What is this math? And that's a bit of a disadvantage for ourselves, because as we go forward, if we want to program any more collisions, we always got to keep typing this long thing out. It's a problem if other people want to read our code because it's just harder to read that. It's also just longer. More code means more possible things that can go wrong. And here's the last thing. Say you go to program this somewhat complex if statement in the future, you might make a mistake because there's a lot of little pieces to get correct. So what I would like to do with this collision code is to put it into the GameObject class as a separate function that I can just call. So I'm going to be going over to the GameObject class, and at the bottom, and notice not quite the bottom, I want to make sure I keep this final brace as the final brace. I'll just move this down a bit. I'll try to keep that final brace on the screen at all times. I'm going to make a new Boolean function. Now, you might not remember about Boolean functions, so let me remind you. A Boolean function is a function that answers a question with a true or false answer. So basically, for example, is dead. You can call is dead from GameObject, and it'll either tell you yes, it's dead, or no, it's not dead, based on whether or not its if statement is true or false. So I'm going to make a new Boolean. This one's going to be called touching. And it's going to return true or false if it's touching another game object. I'll call it OBJ to keep it the same as what we've been doing. Now it'll say there's an error because it says this method must return a result of type Boolean. So basically, by putting Boolean here instead of void, I am promising to processing that I will answer this true or false question. So to answer a question, that's what the return statement does. So I need to put return in here somewhere. So we'll get there. First of all, I need to bring over that if statement. So I'm going to go to the bullet, because I remember it's right here. Basically, this is the if statement here that I want to make simple. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it into my touching function. So it's going to say, this same old math. I got the brace here, so I'll put in else. Guess I'll need to press enter once. And basically, if that's true, I'll return true. And if it's false, I'll return false. There's actually another way to do this that I'm tempted to show you right now, but I'll keep it changing one thing at a time. So here we go. We got ourselves now a touching function that will return true or false if the current object is touching whatever we send it. So because we put this into the GameObject class, that means all of the classes that extend GameObject, like bullet, like enemy, like obstacle, like player, they all now have that as a function that they can call. It's like we built a new ability for all of our game objects because we programmed touching in the GameObject class. So now, instead of saying these long if statements, I can now just say if touching object. And that is just so much cleaner. Anybody who comes in here could take a guess at what that does. Even without much programming knowledge, you could probably guess that we're checking to see if something's touching this thing. Like it just reads like English. And I'm going to go replace it in a couple other places too. I can replace it here. Touching object. I can go to the enemy. Oh, the enemy, I guess, doesn't touch anything. We'll come back. Eventually, it'll touch stuff. In obstacle, we're checking to see if we're touching the player. So we can say if touching my player. And I think that's all the places where we have it. And do you see how that just looks better? Like if I just undo like that versus that is much cleaner. Hey, here's another thing that's great about this. Going forward, I have less work to do. Anytime I need to program a collision, any new object that extends GameObject can just call is touching. And I can't screw it up. Previously, I mean, I guess I still could, but this is just so much more complex. There's a possible chance that I could type that in wrong. Like, that wouldn't be that hard to type in wrong. I can see all sorts of little details I could get wrong. But this is a lot harder to screw up. It's a lot easier to get right. So I'm reducing the number of errors I'll make in the future. And if I have teammates, which in the future, in software development, you most certainly will, they're less likely to make mistakes, less likely to create bugs. People can work together better. People can talk about their code better. It's just better. Better. So have we changed the project? Like, not at all. Like, if I run this, the project runs just as efficiently as it ever did before. The game is no more fun or more efficient or anything, but the code is much cleaner. And that is a big deal going forward in your future as a computer programmer, is trying to make cleaner code. There's probably other ways you can clean up your code, and at some point it becomes really difficult to know what's the best way to organize it. So there is very much an art to computer science. It's a science, but it's also an art, or a craft, I like to say, because the best practices for cleaning up your code and presenting your code to other programmers isn't an exact science by any means. There is a craft to it. There is some personal preference that gets put into it. I'll show you another one last example of how we're going to improve our code. I noticed that we still got this if. That's just a little bit uglier than it needs to be. It doesn't have to be if, because we could put now that this is pretty short, I could put an and put these two things inside of the same if statement. I could just say if this and this. So what I'm going to do is and you should be careful about this. I actually, this is my second time recording this video because I screwed it up earlier. So I'm going to get rid of this if statement here. Watch this. I'm going to get rid of this part and the closing brace. That's what I screwed up last time. Braces, man, so hard. So I'm going to delete that brace and this if statement, and I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to delete that brace, that if statement and that brace. And then I'm going to put inside of the first if statement just to say, and touching obj. So now it's really just one if statement, and we have less braces. And I'm going to do the same over here. If it's instance of enemy and touching object. Note the double parens there. That's always tricky. And I'm going to just delete these spaces that I put in. You know what? We just got rid of braces. And you all know how annoying braces are. That is an uncelebrated but really important part of computer programming that really separates the pros from the amateurs is the ability to make clean code, and you can get pretty into it. Maybe almost too much. You could go a little bit more than you need to. But an example of making your code smaller is not always better, but we're getting rid of lines of code that we didn't need. We're making them more readable. That is so important. The fact that I could almost read this like an English sentence is phenomenal. And I have fewer braces. So good. This is exactly what you should strive for as a computer programmer. And there's more. This code is by no means perfect. It is optimized. I'm trying to, anyways, to optimize it towards it being fairly easy to understand. But it is not necessarily the cleanest it could be. Maybe the word understand isn't the right way. I'm trying to make it as straightforward to build based on what you already know. And so these new techniques and new tricks and things that I'm putting in, don't want to call them tricks exactly, but these new things, I want to introduce them slowly to you. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to do one more thing now, and I'm going to go to the enemy class, and we'll let it die. We'll let it take damage. So we'll check to see if it's getting hit by a bullet, and I'll show you how it's just easier now that we know how this works. And actually, I guess, do I want to put that in the bullet, or do I want to put it in the enemy? I already have object instance of enemy and touching object. So the bullet's already checking for enemies. So I guess that's already here. So I don't really need to do that. Oh, that's so sad. It's already built in. So I guess I won't really worry about it too much. Anyways, that's the end of the video then. So again, the important thing here was that we made our code tighter, cleaner, more readable, and easier to build on, and less error prone, which is something that all computer programmers need to focus on really strongly. Okay, I hope you had a good time, even though we didn't really build too much new stuff onto the project. I hope you had a good time, and you feel more accomplished as a programmer, and you feel a little bit better about your code. All right, take care, Programming 11. Bye-bye.